Alright, me. It is the next day, the 11th, and in the middle of substitute teaching today, I finished reading Marcus Tullius Cicero's Orator, which is the fifth book in the longer kind of concept of De Oratore, written by Cicero. The middle three do not matter, in my opinion, but Orator kind of does, even though it is just one of those pieces that, like, it is just there. Within the background of Latin literature, one of the things that kind of comes up is that they don't really have a exact differentiation between novels and, like, I won't even say novels, but like books of academic nature and letters, right? They use the same word for them, and they don't really have this quite distinction between the two of them. And so this is where we run into some of those issues, right, of where Orator is very much this just massive letter, effectively, to Brutus. Brutus, who is the aforementioned one from the previous piece. Brutus is, or was, a very, they refer to it as Asiatic, but just this very, very logic focused, no any sort of interesting language usage is verboten, and should not be used, because in their belief of this very stoic, very Asiatic rhetoric, is that only logic should speak. And basically this entire letter slash essay opinion piece by Cicero is basically just saying, no, fuck that. You want people to like hearing you speak. And so it's 200 pages of that, effectively. And it's just a lot of Cicero complaining about things, which, you know, go off Cicero, I guess. And the vast majority of it has to do with the way that we speak, right? And the actual giving of speeches. There's a great deal of focus on noun usage, and about creating pretty patterns or interesting patterns or nice patterns within how we speak, which then also falls into metrical feet and those sorts of things, right? And like that's like 70 pages of just focusing on that sort of stuff, which is fine, right? It's just not super interesting to read. But it's also, I think, a very interesting thing with romantic languages in general, right? Of where Germanic-based languages like English, because there's a set syntax and sentence structure that has to be followed. Romantic languages have this very interesting opportunity where they get to play with word placement, which then can directly affect, it doesn't affect the meaning of the sentence, but it does affect how the sentence is read. And, you know, you can do that in English, and other Germanic languages. It is just much harder, right? Versus romantic languages, in which it is all based, well, I would say all, the majority of it is based within placement or the inflectional endings that get put onto words, right? And so it's just a very, very different style of thinking, right? In order to, how do we create more interesting sentences and structures? Well, we get to do whatever we want with them in a lot of ways, right? Lots of focus on elisions and things, right? Really, it's so much of this is just like, it's Cicero going, here's my defense of why I do these things, right? And what was really funny was that Cicero's responding to some very, very specific things said by Brutus, or written by Brutus, and Cicero basically ends up saying, look, I know you have all these examples, but I don't want to talk about examples, because why don't we can just talk about the point in general, which isn't a great argument, right? But he's basically just shutting down Brutus, of like Brutus actually coming at him with examples of why this is not good, and then proceeds for the next 30 pages to just like list examples of why he does these things. And it's this wild incongruence of things, right? Which is, you know, something that has been adopted a great deal for modern quote unquote debates, because, right, the art of debate does not exist anymore in the same way, and that it is very much a waiting for my turn to talk type deal, and trying to get people caught on very, very small incongruencies, right? Versus a thoughtful and holistic debate, which Cicero does a lot, right? And I feel like we can see the direct lineage of these arguments that Cicero makes, in which the argument is, well, if the goal is for people to want to listen to us, and therefore we need to speak, and we need to be very expressive when we speak, but then also, in the way that I do this, even though I don't explicitly say it, you also need to make sure that you completely shut down any sort of I want to just say the word debate, but it's not really debate. Any sense of discussion between and that's just kind of continued on to this day, right? So yeah. I think that's it. I think that's it for Cicero. I cannot ever envision myself wanting to read Cicero again. But yeah, that is Orator, the fifth book of De Oratore.